Master G, can you tell us a little bit, what was it like for you meeting Sylvia Robinson? I mean, at the time you didn't realize that your meeting with her was going to lead to like this amazing sort of explosion. What was that like?
She could come to you and explain to you where you needed to go with the lyric or where you needed to go with the idea. And that was her power. She had great power in making things great. That's why the music stands. I mean, you got to think about it. Rapper's Delight, Apache, The Message, and White Lines are some of the most recognized songs in the history of music. And she produced all 4 of those records.
I'd say that the crowning achievement for New Jersey is putting the rap record in the living rooms of America.
Master G, can you tell us what was your reaction when you first heard The Message?
So realistically, I was one of the first people to hear the concept and the song, because Duke Booty was the percussionist in my band. We had a live band for the first 3 years of me touring. So Duke Booty actually was pitching the idea. And there's also a version of me, Mike, and Hank doing that. Okay, there's a version. I don't know where it is now, but again, we're gonna speak to Sylvia. Her vision and her intuitiveness was the reason that they changed it from a jungle beat to that boom, boom, tap, boom, boom, tap. It was more, she made it more danceable, groovable. And that's part of the reason why the Furious got it. Because as we are like the Beatles to hip hop, the Furious was like Rolling Stones. So she said the Furious would fit the song better.
Jay Quan, can you tell us a little bit of how urban New Jersey played a role in forming the lyrics behind The Message? A lot of people associate that record solely with New York City, so.
75% of the record was about actually Edward Fletcher's, the home that he grew up in, his parents' home, where he wrote a lot of his music and composed it. And I'm very, very honored that I'm one of the few people that Fletcher sat down. You know, he sat down with me for several interviews and pretty much gave me, that story. So, yeah, a lot of that is Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Even a comedian like me knows that New Jersey is America's favorite butt of the joke. But that is all gotta stop. And the Garden State Roots podcast is here to tell you why. Because it turns out, my friends, New Jersey has been a major revolutionary force for 2.5 centuries now. From music, to film, to sports, to tech, and from food to politics. Join me, Justin Williams, to explore Jersey's most revolutionary historical moments and figures over 8 episodes of gutsy game changers and amazing catalysts. Garden State Roots is digging up some stories. Sounds you're hearing gives us a clue to what we'll be exploring today. This is the Hip Hop Experience dance class at I Dance Ministry. Now, we all know that New York gave birth to hip hop, but how much did New Jersey help nurture the music into the global phenomenon that it is today? Welcome, everyone, to Garden State Roots with me, Justin Williams, the podcast series that plans to end New Jersey being the butt of the joke forevermore. Because without New Jersey, our modern world would be a very, very different place, let me tell you. All right, I'm excited to get into this one. Hip hop is my jam, and I'm thrilled to have 2 amazing specialists in the house today who are going to help me unpack how New Jersey helped create the hip hop culture that we know and love today. Our first guest is Jay Quan, a hip hop historian, writer, documentary maker, record collector, and historian for both the Hip Hop Museum in Washington, D.C. and the Bronx, as well as being Grandmaster Flash's Minister of Information. Welcome to the show, Jay Quan.
Thank you for having me.
And also with us is a true legend of the culture, Master G, one of the founding members of New Jersey's very own, the Sugar Hill Gang. Welcome, Master G.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
Okay, so the history of hip hop that we've been told is all about New York, right? So let's start with the origins of hip hop. Is there anything that we're missing from this part of the story? Jay Quan, what do you think?
Kool Herc definitely, threw his party in 1973 at 1520 Sedgwick. We know that, but we know he threw other parties prior to that, and we know that other DJs in that vicinity of the Bronx were doing similar things. We don't take anything from Hurt, but there's a narrative that's been like almost like this dogma, that it was just Hurt, but it was Hurt, and then it was Flash. A little later, but it was Flash, it was Disco King Mario, it was DJ Breakout, and in the late Africa Bambaataa. All these DJs and others played a pivotal part in getting this culture to what it became.
Jay Quan, so even around the same time as you're getting a little bit later into the 1970s, can you tell us a little bit about New Jersey's role in the emergence of hip hop culture?
Certainly. Well, as you know, New Jersey is only a stone's throw away from the Bronx. So everything that was happening in the Bronx, if it happened on a Saturday in the Bronx, by Monday it was happening in other boroughs. So in New Jersey, they had their own scene as well, that mirrored a lot of what was going on in the Boogie Down Bronx. So, for instance, and I know Master G will speak for himself later, but he was in a crew, a DJ MC crew. His partner Wonder Mike, they were both in MC DJ crews, and they had other MC DJ crews. But for the purposes of this, I'd say that the crowning achievement for New Jersey is putting the rap record in the living rooms of America. Sugar Hill Records was the thing that took this from just the tri-states and just the Bronx and the boroughs into my living room as an 8-year-old in Richmond, Virginia, and to every other state in the Union, and then the country and the world. So, and that was born right there at 96 West Street, Inglewood, New Jersey.
Master G, can you tell us a little bit more about the role New Jersey played in the formation of early hip hop?
So I started doing parties in 77 in Hackensack, New Jersey. So it was my crew, Phase 2. Mike was part of a crew called Sound on Sound. So that in the Bergen County, northern New Jersey area, the hip hop scene literally existed with Sound on Sound and Phase 2. And what we were doing is we were just getting the information of what was going on. So house parties, dance halls, high school dances, these were the places that I was doing parties, and so was Sound on Sound. And that merged into, why things happened in New Jersey. That's a whole nother caveat, the reason why it actually jumped off in Jersey. But we had our own hip hop scene. It's just because so much attention is paid to the Bronx, which it should be. People didn't realize, because in those days, New York and New Jersey were like, even though we were literally a 15-minute ride over the bridge, it was like two different planets.
Now, Master G, like a lot of people, when they talk about the origins of hip hop, sometimes they talk about things that existed before hip hop, but kind of foreshadow it. Were you influenced by people like James Brown or the poets, like the Last Poets, Amiri Baraka, people like that? Were those kind of an influence on kind of the emergence of the culture?
For me, no. I come from a funk background, a funk jazz background, swing jazz and funk. Ohio Players, Chaka Khan, the Mandrill. A lot of those groups were the groups that I was spinning. Cameo. A lot of those were the groups and the songs that I was using at the parties. So my introduction to hip hop in general was because I heard somebody else doing it who was older than me, who had been in New York. So my whole concept for music was based on funk, jazz, and, whatever was going on at that time. And then it translated into me putting raps to the instrumental parts of the songs that I was spinning out. Because I started out as a DJ. I started spinning records. So I was scratching before I started rapping.
And so, Master G, tell us, like, why rap at all? Like, what made you sort of encourage you to get involved in the culture besides the people that you knew?
I was already a DJ, and I was doing parties for my high school peers. I was doing that like Masonic Temple, dance halls, VFWs. I was doing parties in Hackensack and then eventually in Englewood. But at the end of the day, I was really doing it to make extra money. The reason why I started rapping is from a marketing standpoint. The guy that I knew that was my rival in the neighborhood was rapping. So in order for me to continue to keep getting booked, I said, okay, I got to figure out how to rap, because it's just like Burger King. You know, if Burger King puts up one burger stand, they got a store on one corner. What do? They get the McDonald's puts another one on the other corner. So I'm thinking, okay, in order for me to keep getting parties, I'm gonna have to start doing this rapping thing, because he said, and the guy's name is Mark Green. He said, this is rapping. I said, hey, Mark, why are you talking on the record? I was at a party and I heard him rap. He said, well, that's rapping, guy. That's what they're doing in New York. Right away, I was like, okay, so I'm a drummer by nature. I started out as a drummer. So I heard the words as beats. And it was also, he was rhyming. So he was rhyming the words. I said, okay, this is rhythmic poetry. I didn't even call it rapping when I first heard it. I said, oh, this is rhythmic poetry. So I'm going to go in time with the music and I'm going to put this together. My reason was purely from a marketing standpoint to get involved. And then in the context, I have to explain to people that there was no culture. Like they were doing it in the Bronx. I wasn't aware of what was going on in the Bronx. I was doing it because I heard somebody older than me who did parties like me do it. The culture, the whole aspect of it as a culture, as a phenomena, it came much later, after the world started getting a hold of it.
Oh, very cool. And for those first rhymes that you wrote, kind of what was your mentality, if you think back at the time, to
Party.
kind of your first
Party. I was like, girls, party. I was 16. I started rapping when I was 15 years old. I was in like 9th grade when I started rapping. So at that time, I was an awkward kid. I was known, but I wasn't popular. I didn't come from money. So my mom was a single parent. So I'm trying to make my way. I'm trying to navigate through school. So, we were in the suburbs. So it wasn't a lot of craziness going on. The first stuff that I started writing was all based on just having a good time and, getting into what it is that we were doing.
Master G, you shouted out some really great foundational records in the genesis of early hip hop. Now, Jay, can you talk about the significance of Rapper's Delight in all of this?
I mean, it's the brick, it's okay. So, the history of hip hop is one thing, the actual cultural, and even the way as practitioners of the different disciplines, the b-boying and the MCing and the DJing and the graffiti art. That's one thing. But rap music as an industry, Sugar Hill is literally the brick in that foundation. Now, you had Enjoy Records that was run by Bobby Robinson, no relation to Sylvia Robinson. You had some other independents that did really good work. What it didn't have, they didn't have the genius of Sylvia. Like as Master G mentioned, Sylvia Robinson was already a record label owner. She owned like eight different labels. She put out groups like the Rim Shots and the Moments and so many different groups, R&B groups. She was in her own right a mega artist with Love Is Strange, and she when she was doing her thing with Mickey, Mickey and Sylvia. So Sylvia was already a genius,
Pillow Talk,
and a record label owner. So Pillow Talk, big hit, right? Pillow Talk, Love Is Strange, so those already established. So she had relationships with DJs like Butterball and all the urban DJs. And these are things that Bobby Robinson didn't have, and others who attempted later on didn't have as strong ties. So Sylvia had the genius. She had the ear. She was a great producer, not in the way that a producer is today that makes beats, but a producer that says, hey, do your voice like this. Do your verse over. Let's bring Tito Puente in to play on this one. Let's bring Felipe Wynn in to sing on this one. She was a producer. So the genius of Rapper's Delight and Sugar Hill Records and the importance of it, it was music that was made for our generation. Previous to Rapper's Delight and the rap records that hit, my generation's music, it was really our parents' music. I came up on Cameo, Earth, Wind & Fire, Coke Escovedo, Donald Byrd, the Eagles. That was the music played in my household, and I had to share my parents' music. It's fine. I loved it. I loved Cameo and the Gap Band and all those things. But the day that I heard Rapper's Delight, to tell you how different it was I thought it was a joke the first time I heard it. We all did. We thought the local station, remember, the summer of 79, Good Times by Chic hits, and it's the biggest record that summer. You fast forward to the fall a few months, and it's this record, and these guys are talking over it rhythmically, and it's a 15-minute record that the radio plays the whole 15 minutes, which is unheard of. So I'm thinking the local DJ is playing a joke, but he plays the joke all day long. So I demand to my mom, we have to go and get this record. I called a radio station. They said it's a real record. It's the Sugar Hill Gang. So immediately that day we went to get the record. And to show you the impact of Sugar Hill Records, the day that I walked into that record store, I told the clerk in there, I said, I'm here for that. And he said, okay, you might be interested in this one too. It had the blue candy stripe famous logo. And this other record that he said I might be interested in was a group called Positive Force. And it was a song called We Got the Funk. That started my lifelong quest to get every record that was on that label. And other youth around the world had a similar experience of if it's that blue cover, it's gonna be good. Whether it's the Crash Crew, whether it's Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, Funky 4+1. This is the roster of Sugar Hill Records that becomes the foundation of the rap industry that everything else is built upon.
And Jay, can you tell us a little bit more about Sylvia Robinson and her starting of Sugar Hill Records? Where was Sugar Hill Records based?
So Sugar Hill Records was based in Inglewood, New Jersey, 96 West Street, Inglewood, New Jersey. Now, previous to that, she had other labels like on Palisades, right around the corner where the pizza shop, Crispy Crust that Master G talked about. She had other labels in that area.
Further
The
down,
Sugar
right.
Hill was actually located
Yes.
at 96. At 96 West Street in Inglewood, New Jersey. And and she's neighbors with the Isley brothers and just so many other great New Jersey icons.
Dizzy Gillespie
And
lived
so
out there.
that's the location. Yes, Dizzy Gillespie, and she was friends with these people, and many of them were actually, guests on a lot of the records on the label. But yes, she started Sugar Hill, and just to piggyback a little bit off of something that Master G was saying, when she was at Harlem World and she heard Love Bug Starsky, he was a rapping DJ, so he was rapping and DJing simultaneously, and like G said, her mind was blown by it. And I'll add a little something that is actually public record. If you go back and listen to a song that Sylvia made called "It's Good to Be the Queen," and it's a spoof of "It's Great to Be the King," which was a comedian put that record out, but a lot of parodies and spoof were going on at that time. So she does this record and she has a verse where she actually, if you're listening closely, she tells pretty much her life story as that part of rap. What it was, she was putting out a lot of disco records and things like that on the different artists that I named earlier, and things were moving and moving away from disco at the time in the late 70s. And she was about to go bankrupt. Her financial situation was in peril. And like clockwork, she sees rap music. And on that song is "It's Good to Be the Queen," she says, my whole darn future was on the line. And then I ran into Master G, Big Bang Hank, and Wonder Mike. So, rap, it saved us. Because as a kid, I was never, like G said, I was never the most popular guy. I was popular enough. I played sports, whatever. But rap gave me something. When I heard it, I said, okay, that's what I'm here to do. It saved my life in that way. I'm not saying, I would have been a criminal if it wasn't for hip hop, like some rappers say, because I became an MC and DJ later because of Sugar Hill Records. And many of the great MCs and practitioners of rap, the recording artists that you hear today, you will hear them in interviews saying, the first time that I heard Rapper's Delight or some record on Sugar Hill Records was what was the impetus for them to say, okay, I want to be that. So very, very powerful. It can't, it's hard to put into words how powerful that label was. It's been a minute, so a lot of people forget, but I always try to remind people, that label was everything.
No, what an amazing legacy. And Master G, can you tell us a little bit, what was it like for you meeting Sylvia Robinson? I mean, at the time you didn't realize that your meeting with her was going to lead to like this amazing sort of explosion. What was that like?
Well, the quick story too is I knew Sylvia as a child. My father was a recording engineer, so he used to do sessions at what it used to be called All Platinum. So when she was doing the disco and the funk groups and that such, the same building was under another name, All Platinum. So I didn't know I knew her until she started telling me where the studio was when we were going to go record Rapper's Delight. But the initial actual meeting of hers, I was totally taken by her poise, by her elegance. I knew who she was. I heard her music. And then the fact that she had so much ability to be able to know, like just instinctively, that me, Mike, and Hank, first she said, rather than choose the three of us, she put the three of us together. Then once she put us in the studio, the ideals and the vision that she had, a lot like what Jay said, she didn't write, she didn't do beats, but she could hear tones, and she could hear phrasing, and she was amazing. She was a true savant when it came to putting things together on that level. So I was blown away. I was always impressed by her, and I was always honored to be in her presence and be around her with everything and that comes with it.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little bit more about how her sort of amazing ear for music and eye for talent kind of led to the arrangement of the Sugar Hill Gang? How did you guys all end up getting together?
Well, that was it. So initially they were going to use a guy from Mike's group, Sound on Sound. When she first heard about it and came to Englewood, they played her a tape and they told her about Good Times. So she had the group Positive Force. They were at the studio at the time, and like Jay said, she was working to get a hit on them. So they were the live artists. They were the live musicians. That's why I told you, Good Times is not a sample. I mean, Rappers Delight's not a sample. She went to the musicians and said, "I want you to play this," and she had them play it as if a DJ had cut it with no lyrics. So they had decided they were going to use this guy, and then the guy turned him down. In the process of that, they went looking for Hank because they were on the main drag. While they were looking at Hank, I walked up on the situation. She heard Mike on the tape, but chose another guy instead. We were at her home, and again, at the time, we thought it was going to be one person. And then before we got ready to leave, Mike said, "Well, Miss Robinson, you heard me on the tape, but I had a cold that day. Can you hear me again?" The ideal of her listening to the three of us, and even though she started out thinking one, I believe that her intuitiveness and her ability to be able to know when something was there was the decision she made. So, as an artist, you're very spontaneous. I'll write a song, I'll write lyrics and start writing them about one thing, but it'll take me somewhere else. I've done shows and been on stage, and the show might have had something going on. I did a thing in the show one time where I never bring people on stage, but just instinctively, I brought a woman on stage recently, and I was talking about dedicating the show to people that you can't love anymore. And at the end of the day, I found out the woman had just lost her son. As an artist, you just have that ability to kind of know when you know. And that's the thing. It's not something that you can just flat out describe, but you know it when you see it. And that was it. Miss Robinson, she had it. She had that ability. That's how she could come to you and explain to you where you needed to go with the lyric or where you needed to go with the idea. And that was her power. She had great power in making things great. That's why the music stands. I mean, you got to think about it. Rappers Delight, Apache, The Message, and White Lines are some of the most recognized songs in the history of music. And she produced all four of those records. She produced, she helped, she was part of it hands on. That speaks right there for volumes.
No, absolutely, absolutely timeless. And I want to kind of touch on the point because Master G, you said you were coming out of the DJ, the party scene, and then all rappers usually talk about the idea of competition. What was your initial relationship with the group like? Did you have a competitive sort of relationship, or did you later become friends? How was that?
Well, there was a wedge in the early days because we were in Jersey and it was a Bronx thing. So when Scorpion Mel came and the Furious came to Jersey, they were tight with us because you have to understand, we were the bomb. So by the time the Furious Five, Grandmaster Flash The Furious 5 came to the studio, I was a national star. I had been on television and I was doing concerts and I had the brass ring. So there was a lot of like competition, but good competition. But we were kids, so it was fire there. I always knew in the beginning that I wasn't a favorite of the people that I was around, but I would, on from a fan's perspective, I was doing arenas, so I got the accolades that I needed.
Okay, with that in mind, Jay Quan, can you tell us a little bit more about why Rapper's Delight is historically important in the history of hip hop?
Certainly. Rapper's Delight is important historically in hip hop because for many, it was the first time they heard rap. For those outside of the boroughs and perhaps the tri-state area, it's the first that we heard modern day rap. Now, people will say, "Oh, well, what about Pig Meat Markham? Here comes the judge." These were like, and some of the what they used to call jive talking DJs that were on the radio, the Hank Spans and Frankie Crocker's and people like that. And of course, you had H. Rap Brown, you had Muhammad Ali. So we had heard people rap because rap is just a urban slang for talking. You would say, "Hey, I'm gonna rap to that girl." It was just an urban slang for talking. So rap wasn't new. Isaac Hayes had a song called Ike's Rap. Millie Jackson had rap, but modern day rap, where you're rapping, as G said, on the beat. You're rapping syncopated to the beat with a certain cadence. That was new. So that was the first time that those of us outside of New York heard it. And it was the first time those in New York heard it on a record in that way. So, there's a lot of revisionist history where a lot of people say, "Oh, I didn't like it. I didn't like it when it came." A lot of New Yorkers that don't like the Sugar Hill Gang, "I didn't like it. I like, King Tim the Third." King Tim the Third is a song by a group called the Fatback Band that was released on like Polydor, a major label, but it wasn't truly a rap song. The King Tim was rapping on it, but the Fatback Band was a funk group, and it was a regular R&B song where he would rap in between their verses. Rapper's Light is 15 minutes of guys rapping all the way through. My children know the 15 minutes of version of Rapper's Delight, and not just because they grew up in my house. All of us. I remember when that record first came out, everybody had their composition notebook at school trying to write down the words to Rapper's Delight. They didn't do that with King Tim the Third. They really didn't do that with any other rap song. That was the only rap song where it was like, you wasted your school paper that you were supposed to be writing your English assignment on to write down Rapper's Delight. That's how new it was. And when G says that he was on television, he wasn't just on the local cable. He was on Dick Clark, American Bandstand. He was on Don Cornelius, Soul Train, Solid Gold, for those that remember. This was the breakout. Like I said, it made the industry the industry. The Def Jam records that came later, and Diddy with Bad Boy, and all of these dynasties of record labels that came decades after Sugar Hill. Sugar Hill was the first, and Rapper's Delight was the thing that funded the possibility. Because remember, Sylvia wasn't in a good financial place. Rapper's Delight at the time, they said, was triple platinum. At this point, we know Rapper's Delight is much more than triple platinum in 2026. It's been in major motion pictures. So it is the literal ground we stand on for the rap music industry.
And Jay Quan, even statistically, right? Wasn't it the best-selling hip-hop record ever up until that point?
Yes, it was the best-selling, not just hip-hop record, it was the best-selling 12-inch record. Because remember, it set the standard for rap to be sold on that format. So when Curtis Blow puts the breaks out, he doesn't do it on a 45 and then an album. He has a 12-inch. Later, Run DMC, up until Run DMC, everybody's putting out 12-inch singles strictly on the strength of Rapper's Delight.
So, Master G, can you tell us what it's like? I mean, you have this monumentally platinum selling record, like you said. You were doing arenas. You're a celebrity. You're in your teens during this time. So, what was that like to be experiencing that kind of success at that point?
It was a weak pull. I mean, I went from being, like I said, a known kid in school, not the popular guy, to literally I couldn't walk down the streets of my own neighborhood. I couldn't hang out. I couldn't go in the bathroom. I had to have bodyguards and, the girls screaming. And so, my experience for the culture is a lot different because I was already catapulted into the mainstream with the success of Rapper's Delight. From that point on, nothing in life for me has ever been the same. I mean, even to this day, it's still weird.
Master G, that's incredible. I can't even imagine what that would have been like. Jay Quan, now kind of sticking with Sugar Hill Records and another landmark album in the history of hip hop. Can you tell us why The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 is so historically important?
So by 1980, a little less than a year after Rapper's Delight comes out, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 are signed to Sugar Hill Records. And their first release on that label is a song called Freedom. And it just is a party record, showcases how the Furious 5 pass the mic seamlessly, make 5 MCs sound like one, as they like to say. So that's a big record for them. Then they do another song on Sugar Hill called A Birthday Party. Then they do another song called It's Nasty. And all the rhymes are just what everybody raps about. I'm the best. Nobody's better than me. For them, they wrapped up, our DJ is the fastest. I can get all the girls. I put all the girls in my car, and I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. It's braggadocio, fantasy braggadocio, done very well. As G said, rhythmic poetry over some of the best music. And then, and music that we're familiar with, because most of these records were, again, as G said, interpolations of already popular songs in urban America, especially. Then in 82, this song comes along called A Message. The music is not familiar. It's original music. And it's slow, and the group didn't even want to do it. It was so different of a record. The group didn't want to do it. Sylvia went around to other artists on the label, played it for them. Nobody liked it. It's too depressing. It's too dark. It's too slow. It ends up that Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 agreed to do the record, but only with their lead MC, Melly Mel. And the record, when it becomes, it changes definitely rap music for sure, but it changes urban music, because this is the first time any notable rap record has talked about the streets and the world as it is. This was like holding up a mirror to what 1982's Reaganomics was, the effects on the urban communities, how it was in the projects in the ghetto, broken glass everywhere, So that's what the message was. It was no longer, hey, let's go have a good time, the girls or whatever. It's holding up a mirror to society. And one of the percussionists in the Sugar Hill Band, his name was Ed Fletcher. He called himself Duke Booty. He wrote the song, and he's performing on it with Melly Mel. And then, most importantly, the last verse is just this incredible prophetic verse. A child is born with no state of mind, blind to the ways of mankind. And it was something that hit so hard, and nobody thought that it would work. And even after they recorded it, Melly Mel thought it, he said, it's no way it'll work. It's too slow. And he said he was in the famous Disco Fever that G talked about, and they put it on, and he said, everybody just kind of stood around, because it's not a danceable record. It's funky, but it's not a danceable record. But they stood around because everybody's trying to absorb it. It's the equivalent of the first time. It's the equivalent of the first time you heard anything. And the only thing I can compare it to in music is probably the first time I heard Rapper's Delight. You're trying to figure it out. Like, okay, this is a real record. It's a real group. And then with the messages, like, okay, this is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, but they're, the whole group's not on it. Everybody is not a party, have a good time record. And that record was so big that summer that, you heard it on the radio. And this is a big deal, too, about the radio. Rap records weren't generally played on the radio during prime time. They might put them on late night Saturday in the mix show or something. But these records, the Rapper's Delight and Eighth Wonder and Apache, the Sugar Hill Gang records, and then The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, you're hearing these right behind Luther Vandross and Rick James and Tina Marie, getting equal footing. And remember, rap is the bastard child of the industry. But yet, Soul Train is forced to interview these guys and have these guys perform. And the message was so big that even the R&B groups that were touring with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 had to give it up to him. I remember Raheem told me one time they were on a show, and I think the Commodores were still together. And the lead singer, Lionel Richie, came up to him and said, hey, man, I don't like rap, but I like that. And that's how good it was, that people that generally didn't like rap, they liked the Sugar Hill Gang stuff, the Sugar Hill record stuff anyway, because it was feel-good music. So generally our parents liked that. They didn't like the harder stuff that came later. But with the message, no longer could you say this is an art form. This isn't serious, because this was something where the message was so direct. It was telling you, it was, again, literally holding up a mirror to urban America and saying, this is where you are. And it was a cautionary tale where Melly Mel at the end of that verse is saying, this is where you are. And if you don't straighten it up, this is where you'll end up. Because if you listen to that story that he tells, at the end, the guy hangs himself in prison. So it's not celebrating the worst parts of the inner city. It's a cautionary tale. So it's the message groundbreaking. There is no Public Enemy, Tupac, or anybody that ever talked about urban life without that record first to set that set that stage.
No, absolutely. Much like Rapper's Delight, just one of those sort of like foundational records that rappers now always say, this is the reason why sort of I got into it, you know? And Master G, can you tell us what was your reaction when you first heard the message?
So realistically, I was one of the first people to hear the concept and the song because Duke Booty was the percussionist in my band. We had a live band for the first 3 years of me touring. So Duke Booty actually was pitching the idea. The reason why he talks about bill collectors and broken glasses, because he was a 30-year-old guy at the time. So the shift really became because it was a grown man rapping. So he didn't even, he just trying to transit. Even the cadence of the raps was totally like out of context for us because we were used to doing it in time, doing it in rhythm, being a lot more staccato, more flowing. So the way he did it, it was like, he's kind of like old, he's kind of like out of context. But what he was talking about, the reason why I think it related to the world is because grown people could relate to a lot of the things that was being talked about. I didn't know anything about a bill collector when I was 18. We had no concept of that. So hearing the record initially, Don't Push Me Because I'm Close to the Edge, I can only think about it from like okay, well, don't push me because I might lose my mind type of, physical situation. I didn't even understand the mental aspect of being an adult at that time. So the record was and initially the record was more of a jungle like beat. When it was first composed, it was a jungle beat. And there's also a version of me, Mike, and Hank doing that. Okay. There's a version. I don't know where it is now, but again, we're going to speak to Sylvia. Her vision and her intuitiveness was the reason that they changed it from a jungle beat to that boom, boom, tap, doom, doom, tap. It was more, she made it more danceable, groovable. Her and a guy named Jigs Chase, which Jigs was a huge producer and arranger of 98% of the stuff that came out of Sugar Hill. Again, initially it was recorded as a jungle beat, and it was more of like kind of like a statement kind of song. But she looked at it and rewired it, and as I said, the reason why we didn't do the song is because we were too much of a pop kind of like commercial group, and it was too gritty. She didn't want my image to be associated with talking about broken glass and people pissing and all these other. She didn't want us to do that. And that's part of the reason why the Furious got it. Because as we are like the Beatles to hip hop, the Furious was like Rolling Stones. So she said the Furious would fit the song better. And then also Mel being the lead guy and the writer. So that's the other thing. Mel is the primary writer for the Furious Five, White Lines, all of that, Birthday. His basic foundation is permeated in all of those songs. That's another reason why it was Mel and Duke Booty, because it was Duke Booty's breakdown, his lyric, and then Mel was the accompaniment of Duke Booty. So I was blown away by it.
So Master D, you and the Sugar Hill Gang in Inglewood, much more of the like upwardly mobile, middle class, suburban background. Jay Quan, can you tell us a little bit how urban New Jersey played a role in forming the lyrics behind the message? A lot of people associate that record solely with New York City. So
Yeah. So contrary to popular belief, Mel's last verse was very much about his upbringing in the Bronx. And that verse, he had already said it on another song, a couple years before. So that part is the Bronx. But 75% of the record was about actually Edward Fletcher's, the home that he grew up in, his parents' home where he wrote a lot of his music and composed it. And I'm very, very honored that I'm one of the few people that Fletcher sat down. He sat down with me for several interviews and pretty much gave me, that story. So, yeah, a lot of that is Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I've been to that park. I filmed in that park and, yeah, I've seen his home and it's a real story. There's a park right across the street. And in fact, that street is actually named after him. About 2 years ago, they had a street renaming, but there's a park right across from him. And in the beginnings of what became the crack era, he would see these hand-to-hand drug sales. So when he's talking about broken glass, he actually told me in one of my first interviews with him that he wrote that because every once in a while, in this what used to be a nice neighborhood, as the neighborhood started to deteriorate as a result of crack moving in, you would hear somebody bust a bottle. So when he's talking about that, and then there's an actual line, can't walk through the park because it's crazy after dark. He's literally talking about the park that's right across the street from him. So again, because these conditions existed really everywhere in America, it had some kind of ghetto, but in New York, there's a lot of that. So people assumed that because some of it's Mel's voice, oh, they're talking about, this part of the Bronx. But the parts that Fletcher wrote, again, everything except the last verse, he's literally talking about sitting in his parents' basement composing music and really seeing the decay of the neighborhood, the neighborhood going down. And like I said, a lot of people don't know that because Fletcher didn't give a lot of interviews. And when the record came out, it wasn't a time where you had MTV and everybody chasing behind you.
Two amazing stories that our listeners are gonna get some light on, right? Like Elizabeth's role and Master G, that bombshell, right? That there's an alternate version of the message out there. People
Somewhere.
start looking for that, I think.
Somewhere, yes. Be Mike and Hank, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And Jay Quan, just staying with you, you kind of mentioned MTV, and so kind of going forward, can you tell us about the sort of newer waves of New Jersey MCs that are going to be following in the footsteps of the Sugar Hill Gang? Particularly, I'm thinking of Queen Latifah.
So yeah, New Jersey was always there, and as the music morphed and moved and progressed forward, Jersey continued to be there. And you had Queen Latifah, who was part of the Flavor Unit, which was a Jersey-based collective. But yeah, Queen Latifah, debuted right there at the late part of the 80s, what we call the golden era of hip hop. I think her first record was around 87, 88. And but right around that time, that very creative period of like the mid to late 80s, you have Queen Latifah coming out. And it's important because she's a female MC that can hold her own with any of the guys. A lot of people see the female MCs, oh, that's cute. A lot of a lot of male rap fans, oh, that's cute, whatever. But the fellas is where it's at. Queen Latifah could go toe to toe with any of them, and she's a New Jersey representative. 45 King, her producer, and that whole Flavor Unit collective really came out strong in that part of the 80s. So indeed.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake One. And for Queen Latifah, what would you say about kind of her? She has a distinctly feminist perspective.
Very, very feminist up front. She put that on the front burner. Of course, her song "Ladies First," where Moni Love from the UK was not only a big rap song, it hit the charts big, and it's an anthem for young ladies. She had the Unity song, which talked about domestic violence a little bit, but it talked about just the unity that was needed, in urban areas, between male and females. And that was a big song, in the 90s. Huge song. And of course, she discovered Naughty by Nature and put them on. And Naughty by Nature, they actually had a history with Sugar Hill. They actually assigned and did some stuff with Sylvia before, which is they were called the New Style at the time, before they were called Naughty by Nature and signed to Tommy Boy. So they have that legacy of Sylvia and the Robinsons. And then she put on De La Soul. She put a lot of people on, and of course, she morphed into her Flavor Unit films, and she started doing films and putting other actors and actresses on it. She's still doing her television thing. So yeah, Latifah is just so big, not just to the culture. She even bigger than the culture. She's just an entertainer in general that has roots in hip hop, and a great singer as well.
Yeah, and Master G, can you tell us what was your relationship like with that kind of new crops? I mean, what does it feel like to be a pioneer, to build something, and almost kind of to see kind of like your children kind of coming along? What was that like?
It's an honor. It's I was privy, as Jay Quan said, to seeing Queen Latifah explode in Lords of the Underground and Naughty by Nature and Redman and all of the magnificent people that have come from Jersey. It's such a powerful Wycliffe, it's such a powerful representation of a concentrated area, because we're still really just talking about Jersey itself, New York. I mean, the Bergen County, Essex County, because Latifah and them come from Essex County. That's a little bit further down from where I am, but it's still it's a 30-minute ride from Englewood to Newark, where they were headquartered. They were basically coming out of. Um, I really think because of the power of the creative juices that you get. Whitney Houston comes from that area. As I said, we had so many other entertainers that lived. The Isley Brothers lived amongst us. We had all of those vibrations, and I really believe that once the avenue was created to be involved, that's the power of what happened at Sugar Hill. Once people heard it, once you make it so that it's on a mass level, people start making their own interpretation of what they hear. And then you put in greatness with another situation. Queen Latifah, like I said, Tretch, one of the greatest writers that's ever done it. So these people are now adding their elements to it. And this is what you get.
Yeah, and just kind of like sticking with that a little bit, someone that we haven't mentioned yet, although we did mention Wyclef. What were your impressions of Lauryn Hill, speaking of another Essex County great in the culture?
Here's a I look at her as a servant. Some people, she is misunderstood. The ideal that she puts me in the mindset of a modern day Sylvia, realistically. Sylvia, Miss Robinson was a lot like that, you know, and can do it all. She can sing, she can rap, she can write, she can act. Lauren is the definite, the next wave of profound international hip hop. You got domestic hip hop, you got national hip hop, and you got international hip hop. And Lauren is that in droves.
Yeah, and Jay, like, kind of on that question, like, Lauryn Hill is so multifaceted. With Jay Quan, like, what do you think? What's your impression on? Can we label Lauryn Hill as a rapper, or what's your take on that?
We can certainly label Lauryn Hill as a MC rapper. She graduated to doing more singing. Like the miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Like as I hit the college scene, the college lecture scene, and I talk to students about Lauryn Hill. There's always an argument when we talk about her being one of the top female MCs and her album, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, being one of the greatest rap albums. There's always this back and forth. Well, is it really a rap album? Because she didn't really rap on it. She did more singing. But her stuff with the Fugees, not just the score, not just that album, but the stuff that predates the score. She was only rhyming at that point. So, there you can actually, for her resume, you can go back and see times when she wasn't even incorporating that much singing into the music at all. So I think she found her calling is, okay, I can sing just as well as I can MC, and more people are moved by my singing, so let me do more of it. But she certainly can be considered an MC slash, much like Latifah. Latifah has like almost a Billie Holiday thing going on. In fact, she did an album at one point that like she covered some of Billie Holiday, like she
All
did a
singing.
bluesy album.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and much like Lauren, she can jump in because remember, Lauren is also an actress. She's done movies with Whoopi Goldberg, and before there
Great.
was a big thing with the Fuji. So they pretty much walk the same paths as far as that. Multi-talented producers, singers, and actresses. The women were always there doing it. On a level, and they're in Jersey. That's two strong, powerful women, Lauren and Queen Latifah for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think history kind of speaks for itself, right? You're talking about, one of the most celebrated solo albums ever for Lauryn Hill's debut, right? Even recently ranked #1 on Apple Music's best 100 albums. First rapper to be featured on the cover of Time magazine, and that album was inducted to the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. So, pretty solid resume for for hip hop, right?
Very much so. Very
Master
much
G,
so.
yeah, Master G, I want to get back to you, like, for a second there. Do you have any, like, stories you want to tell about your personal relationship kind of with that new generation? Because, you're kind of a mentor and things. People want to reach out. They want to pay their respect. They want to ask advice. I would want to ask advice on how to handle being a superstar at 17 years old.
I rub shoulders with everybody at one point, and I've actually Wycliffe and I ran into each other at an event we did in Newark a couple of years ago, and what I get is just appreciation for the journey, and again that's why you hear me say it. I'm absorbing the energy that comes with how people feel about the significance of what Mike Hank and myself did. We had no clue that we were going to affect people's lives the way that we've done. We had no clue that this was, we were thinking we were going to be part of the music landscape. We didn't realize we were ushering in an art form. So the fact that it's gotten this prolific, I really appreciate when I run into, like I said, Tretches. He calls me Unc, and Wycliffe has been. They're always so respectful, and they're always so appreciative, and it's nice. It's, again, like I said, it's something that I'm able to absorb and help me navigate through the wildness of having to even come to terms with what it is that we do and how we have affected the world, because it's pretty hard sometimes to take it all in.
That's amazing to hear, and that respect is well deserved. Jay Quan, I got a little bit of bias as a New Yorker. Can you tell us about the importance of Redman, aka Reggie Noble, in the history of hip hop?
Oh, the Funk Doc. Redman's extremely important. I mean, he's a top tier lyricist, and his longevity. I mean, Redman hit with the with Eric Sermon and the Hit Squad and the Def Squad. With Eric and Paris, EPMD. And this was, this is the first part of the 90s, early 90s he hit. And there's not a lot of cats from the early 90s that still have the same relevance. Hip hop is a fast moving thing. Ironically, at one point, the sound used to change literally every 3 years like clockwork. You had the first rap records that were done with instruments, and then you had the drum machine era, then you had the sample era, then you had the era of sampling jazz records with A Tribe Called Quest. And it moves so fast that it has nothing to do with how good of an artist you are. If you can't adapt to there's a new slang, there's new dress code, a new means of production, new cadence. And if you can't hop into those new cadences and those new things and navigate not trying to look like, like when Run DMC stopped wearing their fedoras and started, growing dreads, Jam Master Jay, people said, oh man, that's not Run DMC more. So I say all that to say, it's hard to stay in that in hip hop. And Redman from the early 90s to now is still so relevant, still so incredible, and still respected as one of the best spitters out there. And his stage show is so incredible, especially when he gets with Method Man and they do their duo.
Yes.
And another one who's started movies is a big part of popular culture. And lastly about him, I say incredibly down to earth. I've met him a few times. It's incredibly down to earth. I remember when MTV did their MTV Cribs, and he said, no, I don't want you to rent the big house and do the fake thing. I want to show you my real house. And his real house is just so much like everybody else's real house, and that was one of the most celebrated episodes of MTV Cribs. And that encapsulates who Redman is. He's the everyday man that can just, rhyme incredibly.
And if you haven't seen that MTV Cribs, it's incredible. You have to touch the two wires of the doorbell together to get it going. It's just a cousin sleeping on the floor.
Yeah.
Sugar Bear. Right. It is one of the greatest segments of television ever.
That's right. Yeah. Very much so.
And speaking of Jersey's importance overall in hip hop too, I think it was Leo Cohen said this, that actually Redman is responsible for keeping Def Jam's doors open, particularly in a period where Def Jam was transitioning from the early 90s to the late 90s. So just to give you a sense of kind of New Jersey's kind of importance, right, in the overall culture. Master G, what do you think of Redman?
I agree with everything that Jay said. I mean, I've had the pleasure of meeting him, and his energy is authentic. He's about the craft. He's not pretentious. He's respectful, and he's talent is abound. I mean, talent as an actor, talent as a performer. He gets it, and that's, to me, is what it's about. The whole ideal of this is to transfer energy to the people that keep this going. We're relevant because people still are connected to what we do, and he believes in that. I feel he does. At least I see from what I've seen.
Amazing. And this is kind of a question for both of you. Who are some New Jersey MCs that we haven't mentioned yet that our listeners should definitely know about?
Well, I would encourage everybody to check out Rod Digger. She hit really big with Busta. And then she, of course, when they had to do her own thing, like I said, another female MC that's, really holds it down. I think we briefly mentioned Lords of the Underground, but Lords of the Underground, for the time that they were doing it, really big on, like, when MTV was doing Yo MTV Raps, and, in the video days, that first couple of albums they put out, they just dominated. And then one of those brothers actually, is a city council person, do it all. So,
Yeah,
hip hop goes
do it
into
all.
politics and things of that
Yeah.
nature. And then you have Ice-T, who, is earlier, but, because he represents the West Coast so much, you kind of just see him as a West Coaster, but he's actually, originally New Jersey, so and it, again, early in movies, some of the first breakdance movies with breaking, he's in there rhyming, and this is, it's like 1983, 84, and a lot of people don't know he's actually originally Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. I another rapper that I always associate kind of with the West Coast. That's a Jersey guy. Rest in peace. Chino XL also comes to mind there, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'd be remiss and talking about the Newark. Did either of you have any encounters with the Outsiders? Speaking of the connection with Rod Digger, and
Yes.
also Outsiders responsible for helping break some young MC named Eminem before he got famous, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so the Outsiders, when you mentioned Rod Digger, definitely the Outsiders, and yeah, their association to Eminem. Eminem was everywhere where where MCs were getting down, doing stuff. Eminem was definitely there. All the early rap contests and stuff like that. But yeah, he was definitely very much heavily affiliated with the Outsiders, and yeah, another collective that's like just incredibly lyrical. A lot of lyricists out of New Jersey. A lot of lyricists,
Yes.
they're boroughs and different patches and regions that are known more for their party MCs and whatever kind of MCs, but a lot of very serious lyrical MCs come out of Jersey. It might be something in the water or something, but they're real writers out there in Jersey.
Speaking of MCs who have gone on to dominate the podcasting world, do you have any thoughts about Jersey City's own Mr. Joe Budden?
I think he's a very smart guy. I think he saw the landscape, uh, and he transitioned, because you gotta have one thing in life is timing, and he was timing opportunity, and he had a topic, and I really think I applaud everybody who sees the vision, before it happens, and that's what I think with Joe Button. That's his. I think that's part of his gift was to see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Very important with Division. Came out on Def Jam very early, did what he did on Def Jam, moved to Slaughterhouse, which is like a multi-regional, MCs from the West Coast, uh, you know, kind of mixture regionally. Did really incredible work with Slaughterhouse, and again, he's an incredibly lyrical MC. But as G said, he saw the writing on the wall. He saw where it was going, and he made a career out of it. Out of the podcasting world, and really, has become like a legitimate journalist of sorts in that world.
Okay, and then kind of on the question of like even like kind of this like newest, most current generation, are either of you like on the lookout for some younger MCs from New Jersey that you're kind of do you think our listeners should be watching?
I feel like Jersey is always going to create what it was destined to create. I mean, look where it started and who's come out of it since then, during the time, and moving on. So I believe, again, there's some young brother and sister, because now, we have the explosion of the female rapper. There's somebody out there. I think Coyle Roy's people might be from in that area too. I've heard, I know that Coyle Roy's mother lives in Hackensack. I don't know if she's from New Jersey, but I know that Coyle Roy's mother definitely is in the Hackensack area. But I think that the wave is going to hit that particular person, and that person is going to put their genius with it, and that genius is going to create another body of phenomenal work. Because like Jay said, Kevin Durant says that the reason why there's so many great basketball players in Maryland and Baltimore is because it's in the water. I think it's the same thing in New Jersey. I think we just got it in the water.
You got you got Scissor, you got Mark Hami, which I saw a couple years ago, very much an underground MC, but he's definitely, he's on the come up. And and like I said, once again, I mean, I can't think of anybody in Jersey from Jersey that we've talked about that didn't have a prolific pen game. So yeah, I'm all because I listen for lyricists, so I'm always listening, like G, he the Cosmic Mystic, he know what I'm talking about. I was even back then I was listening for the pen game and the cleverness. So the Jersey MCs always had that, and I'm sure they'll continue to.
And Jay Quan, like speaking of like things behind the scenes, who are some producers that we should shout out that have links to New Jersey?
Again, 45 King. I don't think 45 King was originally from New Jersey. I know he used to be the record boy for the Funky 4+1, who actually were on Sugar Hill Records as well. But 45 King was a very, very prolific producer. One of the best ever. He passed away a couple years ago. Rest in peace to 45 King. And moving it up a little bit, you had the great Just Blaze. Just Blaze did a lot with Jay-Z and, Rockefeller, and putting that sound on the map. Probably the most prolific producer affiliated with Rockefeller outside of Kanye. But yeah, he was putting it down for a lot of the Jay-Z stuff. And yeah, definitely. And as G said, I'm always on the lookout for things from Jersey. Everything is so like international now, and the world is so open. Like I don't always know like exactly who's from where, but and there's we don't no longer have like used to be a signature sound. When you heard Dr. Dre, you knew certain things were that West Coast sound. Everything is so integrated now. It's not always a embedded sound where you can say that's Jersey, that's whoever. But yeah, Jersey has always been from day one on the cutting edge of all of it.
It's shared information. You know what I mean? Like in the early days, music was regimented to one section. Like even when Dre and them on the West Coast, they were still really listening to themselves. They heard different things, but they were listening to themselves. So, once the whole internet blew up and you could hear music from every part of the planet, I think it changed the interpretation for people.
Master, did you ever play Club Zanzibar when it was at its peak?
Of course. Of course. Do you kid me? Yeah. That's one of the first places that we went to. So like right before we exploded, I kind of was like sneaking in places, and Zanzibar's Newark, at that point now I was able to drive and all that kind of thing. I went into it a couple of times, but and we might even did maybe a performance or two at Zanzibar's. But early days, very, very early before everything kind of like, took off.
Right. And not directly hip hop related, very much indirectly, just musically. I would be was they say remiss to not say Kool and the Gang. I mean, Kool and the Gang, not a hip hop group, but so many people have sampled their work. Their work in the jazz.
Yeah.
Starting out as a jazz band, and then putting some of the biggest pop music out in the 80s when they got JT with them.
We did a show in a guy called Jerry Blavitt had a show in Philadelphia, and we did the Jerry Blavitt show, and in the dressing room was Kool and the Gang. I walk in the dressing room, I see JT. He knows me from Hackensack. He sees me. So I say, JT? He said, Guy? I said, Kool and the Gang? He said, Sugar Hill Gang? I said, Ladies Night? He said, Rapping Somebody? I was like, yeah, we started falling out laughing. That's a true story. That's crazy. True story. That's great. That's my Kool and the Gang story. Yeah. That's the Kool Gang story.
Okay, well, on that amazing note, we're going to give up for our two wonderful guests, the legendary Master G from the Sugar Hill Gang, godfather of a culture that recently celebrated 50 years of global dominance. And we also want to thank Jay Quan, one of the great historians of that culture that keeps the word of the legends alive, past, present, and...
Ooh, G!
And that's right. That's you have it here. New Jersey's central role in the history of hip hop. It's all there now. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much for both of you for doing the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Amazing. It was so good to learn more about the rich hip hop heritage of our beloved Garden State, New Jersey. That's it, people. If you don't know, now you know, as the great Christopher Wallace would say. I think it's fair to say that New Jersey's hip hop credibility is rich and deep. And if you want to get involved with what we have to offer, remember to check out our show notes associated with the series, where there's loads of info about New Jersey hip-hop sites that you can check out, such as the 24 Hours of Peace concert that's held every summer in Newark, KRS-One's Temple of Hip Hop, the Preservation Society keeping culture alive in New Jersey. Also, make sure to check out our next episode when it drops, How New Jersey Helped Build Hollywood. Garden State Roots is digging up some stories.